Hello, 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 and welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you're having a great and wonderful day. I want to welcome you to Black Table Talk. I am your host tonight, Shantae Charles, and I hope that you are ready for some conversation on tonight. We will be allowing you all to join us live via StreamYard as we have this conversation. I'm going to start out because I'll be talking tonight about Colin in Black and White and just giving you some of my thoughts on some of the themes that were a part of this show. So for those of you who have not seen it yet, um, there may be a few spoiler alerts. We're going to try to make sure that we're not telling too much of the film to give people an opportunity to see it who have not seen it. But we are going to talk about the themes inside of the film. Again, we're going to be talking about the themes inside of the film. And so I am recording tonight via Anchor with our podcast, which is anchor.fm/Daring Dialogues. I'm also here with you on Facebook, and we're also on YouTube. Now, if you want to join the live conversation, if you're on YouTube, you're going to want to jump over to Black Table Talk, our Facebook page, because later I will be dropping a link so that if you want to come on and give your thoughts and opinions about the Netflix series Colin in Black and White, you'll be able to do that. So let's jump right in. And the Netflix series is a 6 episode series that features the 33-year-old former 49er, Colin Kaepernick. And it talks about him being a young Kaepernick when he was living in Turlock, California. And the series is based around his high school days, and the fact that he was a biracial adoptee into a family of two white parents. So the series is really an origin story, right? It is considered to be scripted dramedy, documentary sequences, also connected to some animation parts as well. So it's got a little bit of fiction in it, it's got some nonfiction, coupled with it being a personal memoir, but also a cultural documentary. So there are some pieces in there that are specific to Black history that is kind of peppered throughout this particular series. Colin points out in this series that in a sport where most of the athletes in the NFL is about 70% Black, he points out in the series that less than 1/3 of the quarterbacks are Black. He also makes a point of looking at some iconic figures and people who have challenged the status quo, so to speak. He does a feature segment in there on Allen Iverson and how he was deemed as too thug for the franchise, for basketball franchise. He also brings in and talks about some of the influences of hip hop fashion in sports from basketball to football. He also gives some insight into historical figures like Romare Bearden, who gave up the opportunity to play baseball because of some of the things in his contract, which I won't share here. You'll have to watch this. He was able to move from just being a person who was a player, a sports figure, to really doing something more and recognizing that he had something greater to offer than just his talent at sports, which is kind of what Colin Kaepernick gets at in the series. Now, I want to talk really quickly about it really shows that his parents were unprepared to raise him. And we'll get into that conversation a little bit later in a few minutes. But his parents seemed, according to, how he's laying things out in the film, it seemed like his parents were really unprepared for the bias that he was going to face, and they were unprepared to essentially prepare him for the bias that he was going to be facing. So at sometimes in the film, you see that the parents are kind of looking past some of the bias. In other areas, they're trying to use their privilege where they could. In other areas, they blame him for not being accepted at certain points because he would simply not conform to whatever the Eurocentric cultural norms and standards were at the time. Colin says something very pivotal at one point in the documentary slash film. He asked the question, why do I always have to be the person that proves something? Why is it my responsibility to prove who I am or to prove my worth? And the parent responds back, you're the one that's strong enough to do it. But the reality is, as a child, he shouldn't have had to be, right? He shouldn't have had to be that strong person. um, he should have just been able to be a child. But we see in the series that he doesn't really get that opportunity that some of his peers do. He doesn't get a lot of benefit of the doubt. And so we want to look at that. I want to talk about some of the themes inside of this documentary without giving away too much about the documentary itself. So, one of the main themes that I saw in the documentary was cultural incompetence. um, Parents who were culturally incompetent. Now that could go a lot of ways of an adoptee, but you do have parents that whether they have adopted a child or not, the parents themselves can lack cultural competence, meaning that they aren't really willing to go outside of what they already know to understand someone else's culture. And to me, that's a universal theme, um, that any parent can fall into that trap of just only focusing on their culture and not really teaching their children or really learning themselves about other people, which makes them then incompetent in how they are going to help their children navigate through life. In this particular instance in the series, Colin's parents were really trying to figure out how far they were willing to go to bring him into Black spaces, how far they were willing to go to introduce him to his own ethnic experience and culture. And that they had a limit as parents. Blackness for you for today. That's enough blackness for you for this week. And so this is something that parents can sometimes struggle with. They can sometimes struggle with deciding, how far should I go? Do I want my child to be so entrenched in our culture, or do I want to, open my child's mind to the fact that there are other cultures and things that they can explore? How far is too far? The second theme I saw in this series was othering. Colin Kaepernick was oftentimes othered. He was oftentimes made to feel as though he was the outsider, as though he did not belong. Even though he was a part of the team, even though he was going and traveling on these different trips and everything, he was often seen as the outsider, often treated as a stranger, often treated as a vagrant who had just wandered in rather than being a part of the team. So there was a sense of othering where he never kind of really felt like he belonged, even though he was a part of a team. The other thing I saw in there was plenty of racial microaggressions. And whether those racial microaggressions were coming from within, as in within his family, or whether those racial microaggressions were happening through the coaches that he was being led by and being trained by. There was often racial microaggressions towards him that had to do with his hair, that had to do with his appearance, that had to do with how black he was appearing to his peers and to his coaches. So lots of racial microaggressions around centered around hair. The other theme that he covers in this series is the associating of blackness with centered as a criminal. So whether he was on a trip with all his teammates and there would be, somebody looking at him as if, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Um, there was even a instance of where it was unfair, where other teammates were being given seconds and thirds of goods and materials, but when he went to go get something, it was, oh, we have no more for you. That's a very real thing. So whether you are a child or whether you are adult, if you are African American, you have maybe experienced that. I know I have. I can speak from my experience where something criminal is associated with you by virtue of the fact of you just being there. You didn't have to do anything. You were just simply the person who stood out. And in most of these cases, he stood out because of his skin color. Another thing that I noticed, theme that I noticed in Colin in Black and White is adultification, trying to say that he appeared older than he really was, using his things like his facial hair as a reason to say, oh, well, they assumed that you were an older person, and you might want to shave, you may want to shave that off. So the adultification of black boys and black girls oftentimes, and this is data driven, oftentimes black boys and girls are seen as older than they really are, which again means that they're not getting the benefit of the doubt of being a child, being innocent, doing things that are developmentally appropriate, right? Because they're sometimes assumed to be an adult. The other theme I saw in here was stereotyping. Stereotyping. Lots of stereotyping occurred in this film, and most of us can probably list something in the comments of a way that you've been stereotyped, whether it is the way that you dress, as was the case with Colin, the way you style your hair. At one point in the film, his mother says, well, you look like, and I think his father also said it at one point, that he looked like a thug. When, if you understand or know the history behind even our hairstyles, that history goes back thousands of years, not just hundreds of years, but thousands of years. Another theme that Colin brought out in this film was police stops, and how there are some cues, or as some people call it, the talk that is given to black children as they are growing and maturing, and maybe they're getting their restricts and they're starting to drive for the first time, or they just got a brand new car. Most parents are going to give their children the talk. Maybe if you're stopped by a police officer, here's what you do. Have your license ready, have your registration ready, put your hands on the steering wheel, keep your hands at 10 and 2. Don't move until they tell you. Don't give them a reason to think that you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Well, in the film, clearly that talk is not had with Colin because, again, as he says in the series, he thought that he could trade on the capital, or he thought that he could trade on the whiteness of his parents, but he was in for a rude awakening. Again, I don't want to give away what actually happened in the scene, but that is definitely something that culturally, that's a talk that most black parents are having with their children, especially as things have not really improved around police stops and police brutality. I know there is a state recently that decided that they were no longer going to have police officers doing those traffic stops But again, that's only one city and one state. Another theme that's important in this film, Colin in Black and White, is blackness as pride and not shame. Blackness as pride and not shame. He really gets into how Black people are not really encouraged to have pride in themselves. And we're not talking amongst each other because, yes, amongst each other we do it, but in the larger or wider society, demonstrating Black can oftentimes get you censored, or it can oftentimes have people telling you that you're doing the most or you're doing too much, you're drawing too much attention to yourself. And sometimes people would rather see you be ashamed of being Black. That's almost more acceptable than it is to express pride, Blackness. This is a theme inside of the film. Again, if you have not watched Colin in Black and White, I'm going to encourage you to watch it. Tonight, we're just talking about some themes in there. And if you have seen it, or at least you've seen the first or second episode, you can, when it's time, you can click on the link, the invite link, which will be on Facebook, and I will bring you in for discussion. Remember, when you come in, make sure you are fully clothed and you're ready to be, you are camera ready. We don't want any surprises for our audience. So make sure that when you come in, you are fully clothed and you're ready to converse. The other theme in this movie, in this docu-series, was colorism. Oh, colorism. Again, this is something that I have had some experience around as an educator, specifically in the film. Colin sort of alludes to this idea that white is better, that white is superior. And he sort of sets the stage. Again, I don't want to give away the scene, but he sets the stage to show you how many times African American athletes are steered away from relationships with non-white partners and steered into relationships with white partners. He does a very nuanced job of showing that. But again, in my own experience in talking to athletes, both on the professional level and athletes on the collegiate and high school level, this is something that is approved of. This is something that is pervasive. I've had high school students tell me that their coaches encourage them to not date Black women, to not date Black girls, where they've had their coaches say, that they're too ghetto for where they're going. And they have literally encouraged them away from a relationship with someone who looks like them. So I really appreciate the fact that Colin actually brings that out in his series and really drives home and makes a point of saying that Black is beautiful and that there's nothing wrong with the darkest of the ebony beautifulness of Black women. Very, very, very powerful scenes that he portrays in this series. Also, another theme that he breaks out with right at episode 1, and that is the idea of sports as a 21st century slaveholders wonderland. He doesn't really mince words with it. He gives a very powerful visual at the beginning of the series and really kind of showing the capitalist nature of sports industries as a whole, and how much money and how much benefit it brings to the white establishment, not necessarily to Black people, but that there is money to be made off of it. And the way that they treat the players is very much along the lines of enslavement. How they look at them, how they observe them, how they categorize them, how they examine them, all of those different pieces. He also talks about the notion of doing things the right way. He's oftentimes told, or told throughout the series, you got to do things the right way. You got to get in front of the right kind of people. And even as he does that, he comes to realize that the right way is actually, the underlying tone of it is the white way. Do it the way that white people want it done. Do it the way that's acceptable to Eurocentric standards. He also expresses something that I've talked about before on several different shows. We talked about social capital and how whiteness is a form of social capital. Dick Gregory said it this way. He said that whiteness was an attitude. And Colin actually sort of lays that out throughout the series, this attitude of whiteness, entitlement, privilege, freedom, the ability to break rules, the ability to um, show your full range of emotions without somebody curbing you and saying that you're aggressive or you're threatening, and being disciplined for showing your full range of emotions, either told to stop being so angry or basically suck it up. So he really does demonstrate the idea of social capital and whiteness as social capital. He also kind of and what does it mean in the NFL or any other sports really arena, talks about the prototypical player and what they're looking for. Again, he goes back to the fact that, hey, most of the league is black. It's 70%, about 70% of the league is black. And so if you're saying prototypical, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean a specific kind of player, or does it mean a player that looks like you? Because again, the majority of the league is black. So what exactly are you describing and are you talking about? I am almost done. Another theme in here is the idea of the acceptable Negro. If you would just do what we ask you to do the way that you do it, you will get further in life. Don't be so vocal about suffering. Don't be vocal about oppression. Just be grateful that you're even in the room. Be grateful that you have a place and be satisfied with that. The other thing, as a closing here, and I'm going to bring you in if you want to make some comments tonight. The other things that I saw in there was emotional abuse and gaslighting. There is a segment of people that do not believe in transracial adoptions at all, for some of the very reasons that were highlighted throughout this particular series. The parents' lack of cultural competence, the racial gaslighting that occurred. There were times when his parents were siding with the people who were being unfair, things that they didn't necessarily pick up on, that he was being actually discriminated against. They simply thought, oh, you're just not doing what they want you to do, rather than recognizing that these rules and these protocols were specifically targeting him. I often say racism is spelled Policy. And that's one of the things that he showed. He showed how policies were just automatically created, and all of the policies that were being created were specifically targeting him. And rather than his parents advocate for him to say this isn't right or this isn't fair, they basically just went along with it and said, well, just do what your coach tells you to do and everything will turn out okay. Lastly, he talks about, and he really kind of shows the alienation that was happening. He was being alienated from blackness. And again, because he was in mainly white spaces, he would get really happy and really excited when he was around black people, when he was able to kind of tap into that side of himself. And so these are some definite themes that are throughout the series. Again, I encourage people to watch it. One of the things that stood out to me was that whether you have been adopted or not, whether you are a, mixed race or not, if you are young, gifted, and Black, some of these same issues are things that you're probably going to run into. You might run into people creating policies that disadvantage you and benefit everybody else. You might run into or be in spaces where people feel like you should just be thankful that you're here, because if you look around, there's not many of you in this space. Black children are placed in gifted programs or their fine arts programs where the predominant culture in that program is Eurocentric. And so there are a lot of things that could be pulled out of the series. These were just some of the things that I pulled out of it. And I encourage parents to watch it. If you have a student athlete, you have a young athlete in your house, I encourage you to watch it with them. I encourage parents who have young, gifted, and Black children to watch this series. He really does deal with a lot of different themes that affect people regardless of where they are, whether your child is an athlete or not. They may be facing some of these same issues. So at this time, I am going to put out my link. And if you want to join, I'm going to drop the link here in the comment section, and I'll bring you on one at a time. So you should see that link appear. If you are listening by Anchor, I want to thank you for listening and tuning in tonight. You can find the full broadcast at Facebook Black Table Talk, or you can also find the full broadcast on YouTube, our YouTube channel, Church Love 333, and you can tune in there. Thank you again for your time and attention. Take care, and God bless. All right. So the link is now inside of the chat. And if you would like to join us on screen, just click that link and make sure that you allow your camera and your mic to be used, or allow your mic to be used as you're coming in, and we'll be able to bring you on. So we'll give a minute here for those who may want to join me on camera. As we're looking at that, I'm taking a look at my YouTube audience to see if we have any comments here in our YouTube, on our YouTube channel. And let's see if we have anyone that is trying to enter. All right. All right, I see someone popping in. Okay. Hello.
Hi, Pastor Shante. I can see. I like this.
Let's see. I think we have another one.
Ooh.
All right. Hello.
Hello.
Pastor Ben, can you test out your mic for us, please? Let's make sure we can hear you. I don't hear any sound from him yet.
Yes. Well, this is nice.
Hello, Pastor Ben.
He went out again.
Okay.
Hello.
I'm on. Hold on. Let me. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Can you
wonderful.
hear me?
I can. I can hear everybody clearly.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear everybody clearly.
Okay.
All right. So I know I talked about a lot of themes tonight, but you tell me what you got out of it and if you had a chance to watch any part of the series. So we'll start with Lady Barbara.
I didn't get a chance to watch the series, but so much of this is I've heard stories of Black quarterbacks before Colin talk about how they were going into the NFL as a quarterback and they tried to persuade them to play another position because it was said through some quarterbacks that they didn't think that Black quarterbacks was intelligent enough to play that position.
Wow.
And I also remember the one football player that played for the New York Jets, and some of the stories that he told about his experience in the NFL. So he was one of them they shut down and say he was a baby, he was whiny, angry. So all of these things you hear and really came to, you should be appreciative that you are in this space. And so all the other things just pushed to the side. And the part when you were talking about emotion, where as a white player could throw their helmet, wreck the whole room, and he just having a bad day because he didn't play well today. But if you do it as a Black man, you're angry, you're ungrateful, and you should be thankful that you're allowed in the space. So a lot of what he said, I've heard different NFL players express some of the things that they encounter in playing as Black players. And so with him, the other thing that goes out to me, my heart goes out to him. And I've always had this question. My opinion, white people can't raise us. There is a trainer her name is Michael. Her last name, she's a trainer, but she adopted a Black child and didn't know how to care for her hair. So she had to reach out to people to even, do that. And to take away the culture, we have such a beautiful, rich culture. And to be raised in an atmosphere where they make you feel, you're in this environment, this is superior, this is better, and you get robbed of your culture, is really, for me, my heart goes out to him for that.
Yeah, he definitely showed that sometimes people will have a limit to how much they're willing to invest in their ability, in their learning. And as a parent of a child that is not your same ethnic group, you have to be willing to invest in the knowledge that it's going to take for you to raise that child holistically. And the thing that he showed is that they weren't really willing to make that full investment because diving into Blackness was making them uncomfortable.
Yes.
I'm not sure what's going on with Pastor Ben.
It's spooling.
I'll remove him from
he's gone
the stream from completely. Now. Let me see. Hopefully he'll be able to come back on. He's still inside of the studio, but hopefully he'll be able to work out the technical difficulties. But yeah, so it's almost like how far are you willing to go to, let me see, there he is. Pastor Ben, how far are you willing to go to invest in your cultural competency so that you can actually help your child to be whole?
Yeah, that is an investment. It really is. And it's time to teach a child to take to say you're going to adopt the child because you want a child, and then you taking a child that's, like you said, of another culture. So if you're going to take the child, then you're going to have to invest. That's an investment to make sure that they know their history. But for him, it's like late to that, and they didn't take the time to really even look into some of the things that he was experiencing. And one thing you said too, and they said, oh, just like get over it. As a child, you shouldn't have to carry that type of responsibility.
Yeah. That was one of the things that struck me about his whole story, is the times that they did advocate for him was really only around sports, which was really only about how good my child is doing.
Yes, yes, yes.
In other words, there was some parental pride about that skill and achievement that made them advocate in certain ways for him. But what if he was just a regular child? What if he didn't have this genius or this skill? Would you have still been willing to just advocate for him on all fronts? And that's one of the things that he kind of demonstrated, is that they would advocate when it came to sports. But in things like standing up for him culturally,
no,
they weren't advocating for that.
And like you said, because they want the accolades of this, to celebrate his gift and to say, oh, they can have a great conversation with their peers on that level. But as far as him as a child, they didn't have, oh, he's doing great. So they wanted that, but they didn't want to deal with the culture of him being a Black child and all that came with that he was going to experience.
Right, because he was more than his skill.
An athlete.
He was a human being. Pastor Ben, go ahead. Pastor Ben, can you hear us?
This might not be on.
Go ahead. It's not muted on my side. Pastor Ben.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You gotta get used to this one.
Okay, I want to go back to the quarterback thing. I think somehow I'm getting a delay here.
It's okay. We can hear you.
Because I remember when Black quarterbacks were first coming into the NFL, as Lady Barbara said, they were going to make quarterbacks or receivers out of them. So Black quarterbacks started going to Canada.
Okay.
Black quarterbacks actually started going to Canada, like Warren Moon and a few other Black quarterbacks. They went to Canada because Canada will pick them up and make them quarterbacks.
Wow.
Because as far as the NFL, they didn't have the competency. Don't get that one, but color dust again, basically. They didn't have the competency to play the position. Now, when they were using the term prototype quarterback, what they meant was a straight drop back quarterback that could pass and wasn't mobile. Black quarterbacks were mobile and could run. So they were not what they call quote unquote prototypical. Prototypical to them was better.
Okay.
But as we can see, that a mobile quarterback in NFL is much better than a straight drop back quarterback. Because the defenses are getting bigger and faster.
So you got to move out of the way, right?
Yeah. Ask Baltimore Raven Lamar Jackson. He can move. Yeah.
Thank you for that insight, Pastor Ben.
Yeah, you got to get out of the way.
Get out.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on?
And I want to talk about our quarterback. I want to talk about our quarterback here, Tua, with the Dolphins.
Okay.
People are putting him down, but at this point in his career, he's doing better than Brady was doing. But yet, that's not being acknowledged.
That's this right here.
Gotcha. Do they want to acknowledge? Well,
yes.
I think you brought out some very, very good points, that their definition of a prototype versus how Black people move many times is different. And again, it goes back to that cultural competency and ethnic difference. That difference doesn't have to mean wrong.
Right.
It's just different. It doesn't mean that it's not effective or that it doesn't work. It's just they do things differently.
Exactly.
And again, that is a definite point that was brought out in the series. Anything else that you wanted to share, Pastor Ben? I think he's spooling again.
That's it.
Okay. Final thoughts, Lady Barbara.
Thank you. I can always just say thank you for the topics, the books, the material that you bring in. We get to even, this took me back to Monday. I never had it made. It's so, and we're in 2021, and Colin had this experience, but in the 2000s, and Jackie Robinson in the 1950s. And then to hear people say we've come a long way, but the stories are so parallel.
Yeah, they really are. And what's interesting is in the series, he talks about how he was considered a better baseball player than he was a football player, but he had always wanted to be a quarterback. And you know what they show in the series? That when people want you to be a certain thing, because they were really pushing him towards baseball, he had all of these baseball scholarships and offers lined up. And on the other side, where he really wanted to be, nobody was really giving him an opportunity.
Wow.
And so again, you can almost see how a system can push you into one direction with so much pressure if you let it.
Yeah.
Because every season, whether it's the school year or the summer, those coaches were on him like, choose baseball, choose baseball, choose baseball. But that wasn't where his heart was. And so even as adults, I hope that as adults are watching, excuse me, that they really look at how you can push somebody into a direction, how you can push a child into a direction because you are vicariously living through that child.
Exactly.
It's not what's on their heart to do. It's what's on your heart to do because you're thinking about all the praise that's going to come because you were the coach of this great athlete or you are the parent of this great athlete, but you're not really listening to what the child is telling you is the direction that they want to go in. So even in that, I thought that was a powerful lesson, that he knew himself and he knew his mind in which direction that he wanted to go in.
And when you say that, and as a sport, I'm a sports fan. And as you say that, I thought about Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders. They played football and baseball.
Didn't Michael Jordan play basketball and baseball? Jordan?
When his father was murdered, he went and down to the minor leagues and he played, but he didn't do as well as he did in
Okay.
basketball. But he did that after the father because he said his father always wanted him to play baseball.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots to dig into in this series. I encourage everyone to watch it. I think the whole series through takes about 3 hours, but it's broken down into 6 segments of about 30 minutes. So it's bite size enough that you can probably get through it in a day or two. But please support Black filmmakers.
Amen.
Ava DuVernay does a fantastic job. Colin Kaepernick does a fantastic job narrating his own story. The breakout artist, the breakout actor who plays young Colin, Jaden Michael, does a fantastic job. And Ava DuVernay has an organization called Array Now that is a directory of Black actors, Black film crew, production crew, etc. And she's helping actors of color and people who work in those spaces to be able to get jobs.
That's great.
So I appreciate that about her. The last thing I'll say about this series is Colin does a lot in the cinematography. He does a lot of areas where he's sitting outside of the script and looking at his younger self. And really throughout the story, it's directed in such a way where he's speaking to his younger self about what he wished he knew then versus what he knows now. So I want to lead with that question as we close tonight. Lady Barbara, when you think about your Blackness, what do you know now that you didn't know then as a young person?
What I've embraced and know now as a woman, and then where I didn't feel secure in my Blackness, but yet I would speak up when I had the opportunity. But what now is that I've embraced all of my Blackness, and I wish, and it's amazing you asked me that. Some things I say to myself, I wished I knew and felt the way that I feel now. I would have been treated differently because I would have had the voice to stand, in the truth of who I really am, and knowing yourself, truly knowing yourself and your worth, regardless of the color of my skin, and allowing myself to shrink back. Whereas I know, that's unacceptable for me now. And you're going to have a problem with me if you come any other way. But that's something. I had a voice, but I wish that my voice was more, that I know now. I'm in my latter years, I'm more knowledgeable, and I can go and search things out now, and I know how to hold the conversation and stand in my truth and not allow people to change the way that I think or feel about something. So that's what I'm grateful for.
Awesome. Pastor Ben, what do you know now about your Blackness that you wish you had known then? Let's see if he'll be able to respond. Oh, he said, I'm getting a delay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what I know. What I know now. What I know now that I wish I knew then is how much people worked behind the scenes to stop your progression as a Black person.
That's powerful.
If I really knew then what I know now, I probably would have been more bolder in going to my parents and talking to them about the ways that I felt discriminated against, because there were things that happened to me in my middle school years where my teachers were blatantly, outrageously racist and discriminatory, like to my face. But I didn't know how to fight that. And I didn't know how to take those issues to my parents because I kind of thought that's just the way things are.
Yeah.
And so knowing what I know now, this is why I encourage students to speak out. This is why I encourage students to take it to the adults in their life. This is why I encourage students to write down what's happening, take it to their principal, take it to their guidance counselor. You know, and if they feel like they're not getting a proper response, to go higher, but to not let those actions lie dormant.
Amen.
Because what I realized in it, because I didn't share those things with the adults in my life, those people felt empowered in how they discriminated against me because they were never checked. And they were never checked because I didn't share it with the adults when it was happening.
True.
When it was happening to me.
Powerful. That is so powerful. And you know what, Pastor Shante, you say that, it is so powerful. But then, back then, when adults was doing things in my time, it was hard for you to get the adult on your side to really see sometimes what you was really experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, my mom, I would definitely say my mom and my mother's mother, my grandmother, they were strong advocates for me getting into the right programs. They advocated for me as far as like my gifts, but I wasn't really telling them what I was experiencing with race.
Race, exactly.
I would tell them about other stuff, like if I got in trouble for like trivial things, but I wasn't really telling them that my art teacher was denying me a recommendation to get into a school that I needed, and I needed her recommendation. I couldn't get it from anybody else. So I lost an opportunity because she refused to give me that recommendation because I was Black.
Yeah.
And she told me that to my face. So it wasn't like I had to kind of figure out, is this or it? No, she's none of the Black kids that are in my class am I giving a recommendation to. That's how she put it.
Just blatant.
Blatant. And so because of that, I wound up not going to the specialty art school that I had dreamt of going to for high school. And, you know, I went another route. And of course, I wound up getting a degree in art education anyway. Because at that point, I was like, I'm going to be the art teacher that takes her place in the future.
Yeah. and you just think about what you just said is so powerful. And standing you're in the background, behind the scenes, but I'm going to make sure out of this group that you won't get a recommendation from me regardless of your gift. I'm not supporting you.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of that as an educator, and I listen to the things and the information and the wisdom that you share for parents. And you think as an educator, everybody is not in it because they have the heart to educate. But there's some people, you did that, when you did that view board of that picture, from you call it pipeline to prison, and you show the people that's standing in the way to keep our Black kids from progressing. So you have people that stand in the way of coming to certain spaces for the purpose of that, not to educate.
Yeah.
I'll give you a little, I'll spoon feed you a little, but if I can help you reach your greatness, that's not going to happen. And I think as an adult and you dealing with young people, that shouldn't be your heart, but it is. Like it is.
Everybody should not be in education.
No.
Because there are some people who are gate openers and some people who are gatekeepers.
Yes. Ooh, that's good.
There are educators who are called to that space, whose desire is to open the door of opportunity. And then there are people who get in that space literally to shut the door
The doors. Exactly.
and close off opportunity from especially children of color.
Yes.
And so one of the things that can be a bit of a fatigue for Black educators is dealing with the racial fatigue of having to address racists who also have authority.
Yes.
Because you're a teacher and they're a teacher, but you see the racism, and you as an educator have to say something and have to stand up to it. And some educators will do that at the risk,
and some won't.
And some will see it and they'll keep going. Pastor Ben.
That's from educators, white educators.
Same here.
But I had some that would try and work against me.
Yeah.
So I had both ways. So what I learned was to lean more on the ones that's trying to push me and trying to help me and trying to open doors for me. Because to me, that's a true educator.
Yes.
Regardless of your race or whatever, you try to give that student the best opportunity that they can get.
Yeah.
The others are not educators. They're just somebody getting a paycheck to hinder some people and then push others. So those were my experiences.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you all. This has been a great conversation. I hope that people will come back and review this conversation, share this conversation. That's called a generational curse to be disempowered and disenfranchised by parents that are too insecure to stand up. I don't know if I would, thank you for commenting, Pearl. I don't know if I would necessarily call it generational curse as much as it could be generational ignorance or generational fear. Because if you have come from generations of disempowerment, you're not likely to stand up. You're likely to say, this is how things are.
Yes.
This was my struggle. So you're going to have to struggle through it. Whereas right now, hopefully, we're learning how to be better adults. And in being better adults, we're learning how to be better parents, better guardians, better caretakers of the generation that's coming behind us, to say, this is how it was, but it doesn't have to be this way going forward. And here's how you fight this kind of discrimination. Here's what your mother went through, what your grandmother went through, and here's how we overcame it. And here are some things that are in place now that's going to help you to move past it, right?
Yes.
And I agree. That's behaviors that are passed down, but I don't necessarily call it a curse as much as it is behaviors, because when you curse, many times curse. But if you say behavior, then you're taking your power back and dealing with the behavior that has kept your generations down for so long. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense when I say that.
Yes.
Pastor Shante.
Yes.
Steve Harvey broke it down plain and simple with a jar of fleas. He broke down the flea thing. You put adult fleas in a jar, put a lid on it, even though they have the highest leaping ability than anything on earth, their head keep hitting that lid. Sooner or later, they stop jumping. Now, when they have children, it's the same thing. Those children are going to see that those adults are not jumping, so they don't jump. So it's going through generation to generation. They can take the lid off, and the fleas are not going to jump out of the jar. But once you understand it, you have this ability, and that lid is off the jar. Now you can leap out of the jar. And that's what we're becoming now. We're understanding the ability that we have as a people
to take the leap.
And we're beginning to say, no, we're not going to settle for this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're
going
definitely
to go beyond the limits you try to put on us.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a generation that says, I will go beyond what my parents and my grandparents accomplished.
You know what?
That I
Pastor
can, that I am a
Shante?
witness to. Yes.
Yeah, you know what you said, something else you said too, how your parents would go, if they knew they advocated for you. Since we in football, Lamar Jackson that plays for the Baltimore Ravens, his mother was his manager. They wanted to make him a running back or something. She stood her ground and he got drafted as a quarterback. But they were fighting against that. But his mother was his manager at the time. And that is a story that I had saw. She stood her grounds and said, no, he's a quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I mean, again, my heart as an educator is fight for the children. Fight for the children.
Yes.
Don't let up. Don't slow down. Don't give it a half-hearted effort. Fight for your children. And just like with my family, it got to a point where the administrators did not want none of this. We all know what that means. The administrators said, we don't want to see your mama or your grandmother up here no more. So they knew. Again, they knew, because again, the matriarchal part of my family had become consistent in advocating for me, to the point where when they saw me coming, okay, what is it that you need today? What is it that we can help you with? Because we do not want your parents coming up here about something we've done. And so establishing that track record of advocacy. And that was one thing that I saw in Colin in Black and White, which is the conversation we're having tonight about the Netflix series. I saw that his parents were willing to advocate when it came to sports per se. But when it came down to his Blackness, when it came down to him just being accepted as a young boy going through whatever phase he was going through, it was more so just go with the flow. Just do what they tell you to do. Don't braid your hair anymore. Cut your hair down. Cut off the like all of those cultural markers. As he was trying to find his own identity, they kept trying to push him into a acceptable identity. And so what I'm saying tonight is advocate for your children on every front.
Yes.
Don't just advocate in the glitzy and glamorous parts of whatever your children can do. I've gone through this myself. I've pushed back because my parent preferred to put the lid on my insightfulness in education and talents and accept the brainwashers narrative. Pearl, I'm so glad that you have pushed back. That's a great testimony. We're wrapping up tonight. Listen, this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host tonight, Shante Charles. We've been here for our Black Table Talk segment. We will be back next week. We'll be back in our reading of Black Women and Black Love, the war on African American marriages, and we'll be back in that book. But I want to thank you all for having this conversation with me tonight. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be what, ladies and gents?
Be light.
Be light. Thank you all for your time and attention on tonight. Take care, everyone. And as we close out, I'm going to be showing you a spoken word video called Targeted Kid.
Yes.
Take care. Here we go. Targeted Kid. Have a good night. I don't want to grow up. I'm a targeted kid.